Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Caroline Colas, and I'm the Senior Director of Health and Wellness at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. Today on our Positive Psychology Hour, a program that we are in partnership with the Whole Being Institute, we are going to be talking about the courage to try, a springboard for transformation with Whitney Chapman. What allows or pushes us to try something new? What is that impulse that invites us to take that step or make that leap of faith? What roadblocks appear and what tools do we have to make that change to try a new path? Operative word, try. In this section, we'll learn about the subjective experience of courage and how to apply the research related to the courage quotient formulated by Dr. Robert Biswadiner, the Indiana Jones of positive psychology. And if you know how to pronounce that, you can let me know how to pronounce his name. In order to step out into our new path, we are going to be joined by Whitney Chapman to explore this process and the options we have to pull up our courage, to take risks, to examine our fear, and to try something new anyway. Whitney Chapman is a recent graduate of the Whole Being Institute Certificate in Positive Psychology. We refer to that as SIP. And she is an integrative mind-body specialist. She has a long career of teaching health and wellness programs, most recently for the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan and Equinox. Whitney has presented at national fitness conferences and led international workshops in yoga, melt, meditation, and other mind-body modalities. She currently teaches in the cancer care and Parkinson's program at the JCC, and she has another life in theater, performance, and production work. And her most recent passion is performing solo cabaret shows. Welcome to the call, Whitney. How are you?
I am well, and I'm very, very excited to be here and a bit nervous. But I'm really very excited to be sharing with you. And I want to thank all of you. Some of you I know, and it's wonderful to see friends in the Zoom room, and those of you I don't, so welcome. I want to acknowledge that just coming to class and deciding to be here can be a courageous act. So the fact that you clicked in is terrific. I'd like to take a moment and just start with like a mindfulness moment, and we're going to use it to kind of ground ourselves so that I can stay in my body while we do this, and to anchor our courage to be here today. So if you like, find your seated posture, whatever it is for you. And if you're not sitting in a cross-legged position, put your feet on the floor, wiggle your tailbone, your sit bones around a little bit in your chair or whatever you're sitting on, and allow yourself to just round into the floor. So think of your feet being like the roots of a tree that go really, really deep. And think of your sit bones being like anchors on a boat that you've just tossed on either side, so that as those bones get heavy, your torso will kind of just lightly lift up. And then you can place your hands on your lower belly or your heart or just in your lap, and let your eyes close and allow yourself to breathe and to feel that you're breathing, that you're here. You're in this moment with me and the rest of the team in the group. And let yourself just feel that inhale. And imagine that inhale could come up from the bottom of your feet, through your legs and pelvis, up to the top of your head. And when you exhale, it washes down the back of your body and just washes and lets everything go. Literally, if you can let it roll off your back. And just check in with where you are. And then when you feel ready, allow your eyes to gently open. And if you would, this is a little trick. Just lift the corners of your mouths. That's all. It's a practice. And that practice just already elicits a bit of joy. So I am going to share my screen. And we'll begin. So every accomplishment starts with a decision to try. And so today we're going to look at that courage to make the try, if that makes sense. Um, Let me tell you just a little bit about me before we get going. A little over a year ago, I was in a job that was not really well aligned with me, and the company I worked for restructured. So I started exploring different options and thought, okay, wow, what do I want to do with my life? I'm at a point, I'm in my mid 50s, I could make a career change. What do I want to do? And then COVID came. And then there was a regrouping of, oh, okay, how do I adapt here? And then the opportunity to participate in the SIP program came along. And I said yes. And when we got to about the sixth chapter in the program, or the sixth section in the program, Linda Wallace was teaching, and she introduced the concept of courage and bravery. Now, the interesting thing is that those of you who know of the VIA strengths, which are often associated and utilized a great deal in positive psychology, my number one strength is bravery. And I don't usually feel very brave. So I found that really fascinating, that I was really intrigued by this concept of courage and bravery. And my last year and a half has been nothing but stepping into that sense of bravery. Um, so Bill Treasure wrote a book called The Courage to Work, How to Build Backbones and Boost Performance and Get Results. And in this book, he talks about we tend to live our life between two places, comfort and fear. Now, most of us can realize and probably understand that as we get older, we like our things. We like to be comfortable. We like to know our schedule. We like to have everything where it is. And we're very aware of the fear. And often as we age, that fear mechanism is a little more in the forefront for us. But the interesting thing is that between this place of comfort and fear, Bill talks about comfortable. And comfortable, which I thought was a fabulous new word, is the place where we're comfortable in our fear. We're comfortable being uncomfortable. And we get stuck in that place. So what does that mean? It means that we tend to have a high tolerance for misery, or we lack the urgency to do anything. We know that it doesn't feel good. We avoid taking risks. Sometimes we stay in jobs that we don't really gratify us anymore. We don't have the desire to try something new because of fear. We're afraid to do the new thing because we're comfortable with what we already know, even though we're miserable, right? Does that make sense? Okay, so what takes us to that next spot? It's the tipping point. And many of you may have heard or even read the book by Malcolm Gladwell. Well, he talks about that tipping point. What is it that gets us to the point of so much discomfort that we're willing to take that step? For me, it was the realizing, first of all, that I'm the only one who knows how afraid I am. And in making that sense, and when I came across this quote, I thought that was so helpful, because I thought the whole world must know that I'm scared to death, and what am I going to do about it? But they really don't. So Bill talks about these three aspects of getting over that, getting that courage to take those steps. And he has three different types of courage. There's the courage to try, the courage to trust, and the courage to tell. So the courage to try is that courage of action and taking the first step, like actually doing something. The courage to trust is when you're in situations where you have to have the courage to rely on other people. You see this a lot if you're working in teams, or if you're in a work situation, or even in a relationship, where you have to trust that other person to come through. The last area of courage that he talks about in the bucket is the courage of your voice and of telling the truth. Now, for me, of these three courage buckets, telling the truth is really easy to me. Taking the try, that scares me just scares me to no end. So when we look at these different buckets, there are risks involved or steps that can take it. So the courage to try is associated with having initiative and being willing to lead. And it requires us to get off the couch, to get over that inertia. And the risk is that we might cause harm to others, usually, or sometimes to ourselves. What if I make the wrong decision? What if I take the wrong job? All those kind of questions that can come up. When we look at the associations associated with the courage to trust, can we be open and receptive? Can we be willing to follow and not just lead? Right? When you're in a team, there's that give and take. And then there's that risk of letting go of control. And if you've ever worked on a project or worked with a team of people, you know that sometimes that can be, at least for me, that can be one of those moments where like, oh, I wish they'd do it this way or whatever. So can you trust people and those around you to show up in the way that will be helpful to you? And then there's the associations of the courage to tell. Are you willing to tell the truth? Are you willing to step up and speak about what may not be a popular voice, right? How do you take care of that? How can you do that in a way that is, mindful, sorry. And the risk is of your conviction. For me, when I get motivated and something hits one of my nerves of conviction, I have to speak out about it. But that's the risk that's required. And realizing that when you take that risk and you speak what may be that voice or that truth for you, it may not be popular. And are you willing to be a little unpopular? Are you willing to speak what is most important to you about that? When we go into these buckets a bit, there was a study done by Sean Hannay, Patrick Sweeney, and Paul Lester. And they, in looking at courage, created this model for sort of how taking that risk and how courage works. So when we come across this idea that we are going to have, that there's something we need to do or we need to take a risk, we first have to look at that perception of the risk. How big is it? Are we willing to do it? And all the questions, if we do it or we don't do it, that come into play. Then that risk leads us into potential of experienced fear. What are we afraid of if we take that risk? For example, leaving a job. Am I going to have employment? Am I going to have money? Am I going to have a roof over my head? All those things. Then we move into that courageous behavior, which is doing the things that are going to lead us eventually to having basically accomplished that courageous act. And what's important here, when you look at that circle in the blue in their processing of how courage happens, is that it's the retrospective contributions. Do we look at these? And most of the time when you're in the process of it, you don't, because you're too in the process of it to make that change, and you're just scrambling and grabbing and feeling nervous and owning all of those things. But it's the retrospection that can help, retrospectiveness that can help us look at that. So in this journey, let's take for a moment our values. So if we're using values that can be social forces coming from the outside, how it's going to impact our relationship with our community or the people in our lives. If it's values and beliefs that have to do with integrity or valor or honor. And you could also put any one of your of the VIA strengths, any of our strengths. Maybe it's your prudence or your curiosity. But depending upon which external and outside forces you enable or allow to influence you, there can be a positive or a negative impact on this journey. It could be harder or easier. What values that you hold within yourself, strengths that you have. Sometimes it may be strengths that you don't even realize you can tap into. They can also have an impact. So I find it funny that my number one strength is bravery, and I don't usually feel brave, right? But I can rely on my prudence or my fairness or my willingness to be a hard worker that will help me get through this process. The other thing to think about was what they called the reflections on your states of being. So whether you have, as Caroline talks a lot about, that hope circuitry, do you have that intention of hope? The more hope you have, that's a more positive influence that's going to come into your journey of making and taking that risk, making that try. Are you open? Do you have an openness to the experience? You make the risk and you think you're going down the road one way and oh, it leads you in another direction. Are you willing and able to take that turn, or do you have to say, no, I don't think so? So there are both values and states of being that can impact this journey. And they felt that when people were empowered to understand that, then you had a few more tools in your bucket list that would help you in being willing and able to take that risk. Does that make sense so far? Okay.
We've had a question too, wondering if you can use how these items and this process ties into making a change, following dreams, changing jobs, marrying somebody. Can you give an example?
Sure. We're also going to get into that a little bit more, but absolutely.
Perfect.
So, for example, I'm starting my own business. And I'll just take a personal example for me. And I'm starting my own business. And I am not comfortable with being an entrepreneur. And there's different things I had to learn. Like I had to learn about getting an LLC, and then I had to learn about this. And then I found out, oh, I did it the wrong way. You have to go back. So as I start to learn the steps that are going to take me to having my own business, and I can see and dream about, I want to be an international fitness presenter, and I can see doing all these things and I have all these plans, but what are the steps that are going to take me there? Now, when I found out that I needed to have Form X before I could do Form Y, did I let that frustration of, oh, I did it in the wrong order, did I let that become a negative for me and beat up on myself? Or could I take it in stride and say, okay, regroup and let's try it again? So it's that ability of being present and in the moment, and then looking at the choices that are influencing you to make those changes. Is that a helpful answer? Am I getting on the way? Because I know that we're going to go into more detail as we.
Yes, that's great. Thanks, Whit.
No problem. Thank you. And if you have more questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat, and Caroline will let me know. So when we look at this image, and this is an image from actually a coaching that I'm working with to help me with my business. We have influences of comfort and we have influences of fear, and they're circling around us all the time. If we start to plan, we can get into this phase, and this is more with a business, but do you make that choice? You can make your list of all the reasons why you should do it, and you can make the list of all the reasons why you shouldn't, and you get into this paralysis and this frenzy, and then you're in that stuck place. You're in that comfortable place, right? So how do we get out of it? You're never going to know unless you try. So if you never try, you'll never know. So how do we do this? What I'd love for you to do, if you have a piece of paper and a pen or something to write with, is I'm going to ask you 3 quick questions, and just take a moment and jot down what your first response is to these questions. Is there something you would like to do or try? Is there something that you would like to experience that would be, taking a risk? Are you interested in trying that idea out? And will you tell one person about your idea? Okay, now play with me for a second, and I'm going to ask you to vocalize your response. I'm going to ask you these questions again, and I'm going to invite you to use the response, no, no way, I don't think so. All right, so Is there something you'd like to do or try? Are you interested in trying that idea out? Will you tell one person your idea? Now, did you really say it out loud? Because the reason I want you to say it out loud is that that vocalization is going to help you feel your response.
Okay, so can I just clarify for a sec?
Mm-hmm.
Are we saying no to this so we can sense in our body what that feels like?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
So everyone, what we're going to do is actually say out loud, no, no way, right? All that kind of stuff to
Correct.
these questions.
Correct.
Even if that's not how we truly feel right at this
Correct.
moment.
Just play with me for a moment on this. Yeah. So let's do it one more time and really, and you can say it as loud as you want because I can't hear you at this moment, but your house people can. So is there something you'd like to do? Okay. Are you interested in trying out that idea? And will you tell one person about your idea? Just notice how that felt. Now, let's ask it again. And we're going to use one of my 3 favorite words. And all 3 of these favorite words you're going to learn about in a moment. And they're all 3-letter words. So the first answer you're going to give me is, are you ready for this? Yes. So we're going to go back to these questions. And I want you to now say it with a yes or a okay or all right or I gotcha. So here we go. Is there something you'd like to do or try? Are you interested in trying out that idea? Will you tell one person about it? Now, how did that feel? Feels better, right? Can you feel the difference in your body? Yeah, okay. So we get the yes. And then there's this influence that can come into our brain that might make us question it. And positive psychology, Maria Serwa taught us this. And this is one of my favorite things. And she actually knows that it comes from the improvisation world. And it's the word and. Yes, and. So I want to take a moment. I'm going to stop my share. And Caroline is going to give us a demonstration. I'm going to show a video that explores the yes and. And the reason you want to say yes and is that there can be more than one truth that emerges, right? Yes and. And the purpose of that and is to take us to more possibilities, to more opportunities. So Caroline, if you're able to play that first video for me.
Sure. Let me just, it disappeared, so I'm going to get it back.
Okay.
Give me 1 second.
Not a problem.
All right. And then everyone, if you could put in the chat the difference of how it felt when you said no and how.
Oh, you just got muted, Caroline. So much more.
Sorry about that. There was an ad and I didn't want to play that ad. But if you could put in the chat, like how it felt, the difference between when you said yes and when you said no to those same questions. I think that would be interesting for Whit to know that while I just get this set up. And I'm going to add my spotlight here.
Feel freedom and joy. Great.
Yeah, and I noticed I had like a tightness in my body when I said no, like no, right around my heart. And then I felt open.
Yeah, someone said they felt downward energy when they said no and positive or upward energy when they said yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you've been in class with Caroline or with Mega, they've used movement and things to help us really see that. Yes, felt really better. Okay. I felt like a petulant child. Okay.
All right. I think we're here. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Hang on. Here we go.
How to do some improv warm-ups, and now we're going to show you how to play yes and. If you're familiar with improvisational theater, you're probably familiar with yes and.
Whoops.
Yes and is a general philosophy to agree with what your partner is saying and then to add additional information. In order to play yes and as a warm-up exercise, have your team partner up into pairs of 2. At that point in time, the pairs are going to turn facing each other, and they're going to speak some information into existence, At which point the next player is going to yes and it, which means to agree with and add more detail to the situation. Watch Daniel and I go through this a couple times and I think you'll understand. I went to the bank today.
Yes, and it was awesome. They had completely renovated the entire building.
Yes, and the renovations were so nice that they caught my eye when I was driving down the road.
Yes, and I thought they were so beautiful, I thought I'd take a picture with my new camera phone.
Yes, and once I had 40 pictures, I published an album called Pictures of My Favorite Bank, What Looks Cool.
Yes, and I posted it online on a website, and it got up to 40,000 hits a day.
That's how you play yes and. You just continue to agree with what your partner has said and then add new information.
Yes, and it's great.
Yes, and we hope that you learned how to play it.
Great.
So
So I'm going to
Hang on a
ask.
second.
Yep. Oh, this was interesting. Elaine stated that when she was doing that questionnaire that I asked you about a moment ago, she said that she first picked something she really didn't want to do, so the no was easy. And I'm assuming that if she picked something that she was interested in or really wanted to do, the yes became easier. That would be my hope. Okay, so I want to ask a favor of you, and I want to ask you for a courageous act. Are you ready? What I'd like to do is put you in groups to go into a quick breakout room. And we're going to try this yes and practice because I want you to have the ability of just a little practice. And so what we'll do is it will put you in groups of, I'm guessing like 4 or 5, Caroline, are you able to handle that? Something like that, 5 or 6, whatever. And whoever is the first name of the alphabet, so if you're a letter, I'm W, so I'll be at the back end. But if your name begins with an A, B, or C at the beginning, and the person who's first just makes a statement like, I want a cup of coffee. And then the person who's next would come in and say, and I'm going to have a croissant. Yes, and I'm going to add a croissant to that. And then the next person will say, and I'm going to eat it out at the cafe under the beautiful sunshine. And then the next person, so you just go around the room once and give it a try to say yes and. Are you game? Okay, so we're going to put you in breakout rooms. We'll be there for just a minute or two. I just want to give us a little practice.
Here we go. Sometimes just a sign, you just say yes. And
Exactly.
and then you're going to give me something to broadcast to everybody. Did you write that in the chat for me? Oh, I think she left. Okay, let me just double check to make sure that everybody got into a room. All right. Is there anybody left here in the room that would like to play yes and with me? Anybody brave that Mijanu, you want to play, or Steve? So we have for the recording a yes and. Well, I could be 2 people. All right. Oh, that's okay, Steve. Thanks for letting me know. All right, so here I am. It's a gorgeous day outside. Yes, and the sun is shining through my window. Yes, and it's really coming right into my eyes. Yes, and that's why I'm glad we have so many beautiful curtains and blinds. Yes, and those curtains and blinds are handmade and they're just absolutely gorgeous. I love them too. Yes, and I love them too. And it reminds me of my grandmother's curtains and blinds when I was a kid. Yes, and I loved those blinds too when I was a kid. They kept me, I remember they had the flowers on them, the light shined through them, and I used to play underneath them and have a good time. Yes, and I used to play hide and seeks in them as well. So you get the point. This is going to be hilarious in the recording. Anybody want to unmute and comment on that? You're welcome to. Or you can let me go. I think that Whitney, actually, I'm going to go ahead and close all rooms so people can come on back. Thank you all for playing with me here and letting me be somewhat ridiculous. Here we go. We have some people in the chat. Great. Oh, yes. Did I make you smile, Steve? That's great. There we go. And here comes everybody. Hey, Janet. It's nice to see everybody popping back. Beautiful. Great. Did you have fun? Did I bring you back too soon?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Did you come back too soon?
Yes.
I did. Oops.
Sorry.
What I did notice is sometimes we didn't say yes, we just said end. And when we said yes, end, it felt so much better.
Ah, nice.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I agree.
I love that. Anybody else want to add on to that?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. And am I back with the group?
Yes, and you are.
I got
What
one.
Unfortunately, Barbara was not heard in the breakout room. That was the problem.
I didn't know what a breakout room was.
Oh,
Well, you did
well.
well.
You did show up, but
Where
we
you
couldn't
break
hear you.
dance.
Listen, you're talking to your grandmother here.
That's all right.
Okay,
Yes,
you can still break
That's fine.
dance.
That's fine.
and I wish I was a grandmother. Okay, so we're going to just come back to Whitney for a second.
Caroline.
So
Hang on one second. I'm just going to mute y'all, or if you can mute
Can
yourselves,
I
that
get
would be
rid of
great.
that mute my auto? Can I get rid of that rectangle where my face is?
yes, and you do that by going to your small picture, and there'll be 3 little dots.
Yes.
And you can do what's called hide my view, and then you don't have to see yourself. So you all get A+ for class today because you took a courageous act and you gave it a try. So very good, very good. Yay,
Oh, wait
they say in
wait
Latin.
until you see what I did. Because I was left alone. So I played yes and with myself over here and over here. You can all check that out on the recording. We will send that out with the PowerPoint as well. So what else do you have for us?
I want to show you one more video in a moment that's of Tina Fey, and you all know Tina Fey. She has a huge improv background, and it's a little 2-minute video because I want to show you how when we say no and how it happens kind of unconsciously, like we don't realize that we're saying a no. But this is just a really good example real quickly, and then we'll move on because I got still a whole lot more to share with you.
Absolutely. Here we go. I think I've got this ready for us. And let me know if you can hear it.
So for example, stop, I've got a gun.
The gun I gave you for our wedding anniversary, Eric, how could you?
We're not married.
Aha, we're not married is a denial. We've learned our first improv lesson. Very hard, it takes a long time to learn.
This is the problem with an engineer trying to learn improv.
It takes a long time to learn those basic rules of improv.
So why don't you take us through them, and they're in the book.
Sure, they're in the book, because I was an improviser at Second City and at a place called the Improv Olympic in Chicago, and I talk in the book about improv having really kind of changed my professional life and even sort of my worldview a little bit. There are some basic rules of improvisation. When you're creating something out of nothing, the first rule is to agree, which is to say yes, which we did do that successfully. You said, freeze, I have a gun, and I didn't say, that's not a gun, that's your finger. I said,
which is what a Google person would say.
yeah, well, no, I don't know.
Okay.
So we agreed, and the next rule is yes and, which is to add on to what you've already agreed upon. So the gun I gave you for our wedding anniversary, how could you? And then we hit a brick wall, Eric. But it's a very, it's funny because it's some very famous comedians there's an old story about Joan Rivers was at the Second City briefly in 1959, 1960, and they use this in class at Second City all the time, that there was someone came in, said, I want a divorce, was the beginning of the scene. She said, I want a divorce, and whoever was with her on stage said, but what about the children? And she said, we don't have any children, which in the moment got a big laugh.
But stops.
but killed the scene. So that's it's a very
So my response would be,
human instinct.
yes, we have children. I just didn't tell you. That's why we're getting
Yes.
divorced.
Yes. I have some other children.
Yes.
Just
All right.
Thank you. So what I love about that little clip, first of all, I love Tina Fey, but I love that you start to realize how you subtly will say no and not realizing you're saying no. So I want to come back to my PowerPoint. And I got to be in a group and someone said, well, I wish that I had more, I need to practice this more. And we do. And it is a practice. And I've studied improv and it can take time. So how do you practice this on your own if you don't have a group of people that are willing to yes and you? So if you go back to that first idea that you had, when I asked you those 4 questions, was there something you wanted to try? You can write it out for yourself. Yes, and you fill in the blank. And you're going to notice when you fill in that blank that sometimes those ands are going to take you forward. And they're going to take you into that place of progress and keep this, as they would say, keep the scene running in theater. The gentleman who created one of the great experts in improv, his name is Keith Johnstone. He had this beautiful quote. He said, you can say no and be rewarded with safety, or you can say yes and be rewarded with adventure. So for your own practice, when you're working on your risk-taking activity, whatever that may be for you, if you don't have a partner that you can practice this with vocally, do it writing, because we know that when we write, not type, but when we write, neurologically, it is creating a pattern in the brain that is going to help make that transition. So the other thing when we want to notice, if we go back to those 3 questions, I'm going to let you take a quick moment to yourself. I'm going to ask you those same 3 questions. And I want you to just say to yourself, yes, and. And if you're not what sure the and is, the and can be, I'm going to give you an and. Your and could be, if you can't think of one yourself, and I'm going to tell Whitney all about it over coffee. So I might end up with a whole lot of coffee dates, but that's okay with me. So just very quickly, is there something you'd like to do or try? Answer it for yourself. Say it out loud. And did you get the and in there? Yes, and. Okay. Are you interested in trying that idea out? Great. And will you tell one person about it? So you've already started that bucket of try. You have already started to fill that bucket of try by taking the risk of saying yes and. Now, sometimes you may notice that when you write your ands, it's not always a great and. And that's when we get into that it's time for spring cleaning. Because sometimes you'll say, yes, I want to do this, and I'm really scared. Where does that take you? So we have to remember that there is, we know from positive psychology, a negativity bias, and it takes 5 positives to let go of or erase 1 negative. And I love this image, 5 to 1. So if when you're doing your ands, you find that you end up in that negativity bias, take a breath, step back, and see what another and can be. So you start to build, literally, you're building the muscle of staying the yes and. Because you have my favorite 3rd word is yet. So you may not know how you're getting there yet, but it's the yet. So yes, and yet. Those are the 3 keys that when I learned this, I went, oh, I got it. I don't have to have it all today. So those of you that felt like you needed to try more in this practice game, you can, because you'll get there. It's just the yet. And that was the gift of Linda Wallace. When she showed me yes, I was like, oh, life can be a little bit easier. All right. I want to share with you also the work of Robert Biswa Diner. He wrote a book called The Courage Quotient. And there are 5 main aspects of this courage quotient. The first is, what is your courage to act over your fear? What is the ratio? of that. And so you can take a moment really quickly and just write down, what is your courage to act on this thing that we talked about at the beginning? And what is your fear number? If you, let's say it's just a scale of 1 to 10. Now, if that number for you is your courage to act like you got this, you're ready, and your fear about it is a 2, you're more likely to feel successful and to make progress. If your courage to act is 4, you're really scared or fearful or concerned. You're not motivated. Let me say that. If you're not motivated to act and your fear is really big, that's going to prevent you from doing it. And someone earlier in class mentioned that their first comment when they wrote it down wasn't something they were really that interested in. So saying no was really easy. And I think it was an Elise, but thank you for that example. Right? So having that courage quotient and being willing to know that. And this was also another way to look at, did I really want to make this change? Do I not? What's the risk factor there? So that was another tool that helped me evaluate my willingness and my capacity to do it. Now, if you really want to do it, but your fear is really big, then can we pull on those strengths that we may not know about? His second point in his book is blindness. And blindness really pulls on, you don't see it within yourself, right? You don't see the strengths that you have to do the courageous act. And we know that when change is going to happen, it's not easy sailing. There has to be that uncomfortableness. The lotus blossom starts out in the mud and it fights its way up through the water before it gets to the top. So we have to be willing to know that it's going to be uncomfortable. And can we go back and seek out those strengths that we may not realize we have? Your friends and colleagues, people around you, they know it and they can see it in you. So if you're not sure, ask. He also talked about, in this ability to take the leap, this blindness, the concept of general courage versus specific courage. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think about being brave and courageous, to me, that's like the knight in shining armor, or the guy who, or the person who runs into a fire to save somebody. That's a big, courageous act. But we all have specific courageous acts. For example, if you're someone who has a fear of flying, but you have to get somewhere and the only way you can get there is by a plane, then you have to acknowledge the risks that it takes for you, the courage that it draws upon you to get in the cab, to get to the airport, to get through the security, to get onto the plane, and then to get off, right? Those are courageous acts. So give yourself credit for those, what can be small acts that for some of us feel as big as running into a burning building, right? To do something. His third point, and I love this one, is the play courageous roles. Act as if, right? Act as if you're already there. What would you do? How would you move? I know people who will literally put on perfume, or they'll wear a certain earring because they know that if they feel like they have those earrings on, or they have their hair done a certain way, that it makes them feel a little courageous. So get out your cape, put it on, and give it a try. His fourth point is called the acceptance of failure. And we don't often realize how often it takes before we get to success. And we have to be willing to acknowledge all those steps along the way. If you think of Babe Ruth, for example, a baseball player, and he was known for having a career high record and had the record for many, many, many years before it got broken of the number of home runs. But have you ever looked at the number of at-bats that he had where he struck out, or he maybe only made it to first or second base? In the film industry, Michael Beckworth, who is one of the leaders of the Agape Church, talks about that in the film industry, when they're making a film, it's all about the mistakes, right? They don't shoot a film on the first take. There are multiple takes until they find the right one, or they have enough that they can put it all together and make the right one. So embrace those mistakes. And then as you start to embrace those mistakes, the failures lead you in that direction to finding that success. His fifth point is play to win. And I don't know any athlete who walks into a game or a race without the intention that they're going to win. And if you've ever seen some great games or some great athletes who might even be from behind, and they somehow pull up the skills or the energy or the talent or the luck, as some people will say, to win, we all have it in us. We have all done it many, many times, but we have to keep that player's mindset of playing to win. So the tools that you can use to help you on that way is to see the target. I have the vision of what I want my business to be. And I start to figure out, I see it, I add words to it, I make a list of the things that I want, all the things around it, and I see what that target is. Then you need a roadmap. So one of the skills you can do is you're here and you know you want to get there. Draw the roadmap to where you want to go. And just like in your car, sometimes the GPS will redirect you, right? So you think you're going down this path and then, oh, I got sidetracked. I have to take the detour. Okay, there's the detour. I still want to get over here. The GPS redirects you and you get back. So making a roadmap can break down all those steps so it doesn't become so fearful, and it's little bitty pieces. Another tool that you can use in your belt is creating a support team. Accountability buddies is the new in word. A buddy, a coach, a mentor. Now, for me, the word accountability makes me feel like I'm going to be judged. But I love having a buddy or a partner who's going to check in with me. So that might be a way to practice your yes and, or to see what progress you made. So give yourself as many of these tools as you can. Make a vision board. Now, I happen to know that this Sunday, the JCC on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, offers a digital vision board class. So right away, you can jump in and start to figure out what that is. I was talking to one of my mentors just before this class, actually, and in this place of my vision of my new business, there's certain things that I'm not really sure yet. But he said to me, well, but can you know what you don't want? And I said, absolutely. So even if you're not sure and you're not clear yet on all those things to take that courageous act or to be there, if you start to aware of the things that are no longer serving you, right? And if you go back a moment to that job, if you've ever been in a job that just you feel like you're in a dead end place, you're not moving anywhere, you're not growing. I know when I'm in those places, I can give you a list a mile long of the things that are wrong, of the things that I don't like. But to have the courage to think, well, what could it be? Could I be open to, wow, what if they did want to pay me a lot of money? And what if, and what if, and what if? So play in that soup of the what if. Let yourself be there. One of the most important things to do is to acknowledge the small steps. Now, often we have our to-do list, right? We've made the roadmap and we see that mile-long list of things that will help us get to that courageous act. But I really want to encourage you to acknowledge the things that you do along the way. I actually started an acknowledgement journal. Now, at night, I say my 3 gratitudes. What am I grateful for today? And then I started making a list of all the things that I accomplished in that day. And there were days where I felt like, oh, I'm in this pandemic, I can't go anywhere, nothing is happening. And so I started writing down all the things I did in a day. I got up, I fed my cats, I brushed my teeth, I took a shower, I cleaned my apartment, I made 3 calls about my business, I did this, I did that. And you start to realize all of the things that you are doing directly and indirectly that are going to support moving into that direction you want to go. Now, you might think that cleaning your house isn't helping you open your new business. However, if your space feels good, aren't you going to be a little more available to think and brainstorm and take risks and do, right? Versus when your space is crazy. So acknowledge that a lot of little things that may not be directly related to what you think are the steps to that can influence your journey. Really important. is to acknowledge and celebrate the accomplishments. I got that LLC done in a backwards way. Woohoo! Right? I contacted this person or I did that. Woohoo! It sounds really silly, but it's sort of like the happy dance around your room. And I know Caroline and Mega have done that with us, right? Just get up and dance. It's really important because that is going to fuel that energy loop. That's going to fuel the yes and pattern that's in your brain, both neurologically, physically, and spiritually. Like your own spirit, you're going to feel better when you can celebrate those little things. I want to remind you, and this was really important to me when I came across this quote, that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is that quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I'm willing to try again tomorrow. Right? It's not necessarily always the big things, but it can be the small things. I want to share with you one other thought that I came across in my exploration of this topic. There was a woman, let me see if I can find her name. Where is it? I'm trying to find my notes. Forgive me of her name, but I will find it. Ellen Langer. Ellen Langer talked about the role of playing courageous roles. And she did a study, so I'm going back to one of those points earlier. She did a study where she had people come in to get an eye exam. And half the group just wore their regular clothes and got their eye exam. The other group did their eye exam, and then they had to put on a uniform of a pilot. And we know that pilots have to have really good eyesight in order to do their jobs. Those people that walked into the room dressed and acting as if they were a pilot then had better eye scores than when they were by themselves. So that's amazing, right? So I want to encourage you to look through those things that I shared with you today. See what resonates. Know that I can always be your yes and you can call me for a cup of coffee and I'll be more than happy to try to help you make those acts. I want to open it up for any last minute questions and things like that, but I also really want to say thank you to Caroline, to the Whole Being Institute, to Phoebe, and really to all of you for being here. It was a courageous act. I so appreciate your support. I hope that you had some fun today, and I hope that you found something helpful and worthwhile. And I'm going to acknowledge that you all get an A because the courageous act of showing up counts.
Awesome, Whit. We have some questions in the chat. We can give you, Elaine is clapping for you, and a lot of people are, and showing lots of support. So let me just ask them. Whitney, amazing, says Lisa. Very useful and practical, says Vance. Thank you, Whitney. Yeah, great. Lots of love in the chat that's coming your way. Whitney, you rock, says Robin. We also wanted to, there was a question about, hang on one second, about talking about mistakes. The mistakes, can you go review that for
Sure.
mistakes?
So whenever we're trying to do something, if you think about, let me take you back. When you think about a toddler who's learning how to walk, right? They get themselves to that upright position and they do that little shake, right? You see that little shake, and then they've watched people walk for quite a while, and then they try to move that first foot forward. And then they might get that first foot forward, and then they rock a little bit, and then they're kind of stable, and then they just fall over, right? Can you get back up? Get yourself back up, find your feet. You try that little rock again. You might try using the other foot first, and then you decide, you got it, you're good. You take another step, and then you fall over. And sometimes you can see yourself falling before you fall, and sometimes it just happens. But the important thing is, instead of what I know I tend to do, which is like, I'll never get there, I beat myself up, I have that I'm really good at that negativity bias. Boy, that can kick in, and I can spin all that out. let it spin if you have to, and then you stop and you say yes, and I can get back up, I can try another way. And if you really want it to help yourself, and I did this at a time in my life when I was going through some massive changes, I literally started taking an improv class. And what was so fascinating to me in the class, and I am certain there are improv classes online now that you can do if you're not in a place where they're doing things live, is that the more I literally practiced it, I started to see the changes in my life. And so we talk about these things, but it is just a practice. And the more you let yourself practice, that's why I teach yoga, is because I can come to the mat every day and I can do a downward dog. And some days that feels good. And some days it's like, ugh, what was that? Some days I can get my foot up over my ear, and other days I'm like, not even close. Take the attachment to that end goal away. See it. Know that it's there. But what if you had to take a different route? Right? Would you still be willing to take a different route to get to the end goal? And I bet if we can let go of that bucket of trust, that courage of trust, and let other people in, we can still get to that goal. The journey might not be that straight line you thought you were going to take, but you might be surprised. So it's just that get up and do it again. Get up and do it again.
Along those lines, Robin was commenting that she said she loves the yes and game. It's so resonated with her because her dad used to call her the yes but girl, because she would always what if everything. And that relates to another, and I know that Robin has been taking improv and doing quite a bit of improv. So that's a wonderful strategy for this time, for this pandemic. And as we sort of open up, and we might be a little afraid just to, like, what if you're afraid of needles and yet you want to get vaccinated? Like, that can be a courageous act too, right, Whit?
Oh, yes. Yes. That goes back to, was it a specific courage or a big courage, right? And it's still courage. I can tell you that this year and plus for me of being in this place of limbo, from a solid career path, I knew exactly where I was going, to figuring out what was next, to then a pandemic, and like figuring it out is not comfortable. It is not always comfortable, but there are those moments when it is, and you have to celebrate them. You have to go, oh yeah, I got that today, right?
Yeah,
My Zoom presentation worked today. Woo!
And Anita made an interesting point. She said, can't yet be endless though. You know, like, I can't do it yet, I can't do it yet. And so how do you, and Lori responded by, I think it can be endless if you let it be endless, if you let it flap in the wind. But, you know, yet is meant to motivate, wouldn't you say, Whit? But that's an interesting point. Do you want to comment on that?
I do. It's a really great point. And what I'm going to say to you, if you were to look at the yet as being a lifelong learner, right? Many of us, if you're here today, you are that learner. You're interested in learning, you're interested in change. So it's sort of like you get to one level and then you get to the next level. If you think about an actor, rarely does an actor without any training show up on Broadway when Broadway was happening, right? They've taken classes, they've taken courses, they've been in off. They've performed in community theater. It's just, you keep making the steps, and you don't always know how you're going to get there, but you'll get there. Or maybe your journey starts in one path and then you realize you're supposed to be somewhere else. Like, I didn't know I was going to be a health and wellness yoga teacher. I started off in the world wanting to be a performer, and I still perform, but then I found this whole other path that met a lot of the needs and desires and things that I loved about performing, and yet it also gave me something different. So my yet keeps evolving. And I would also say to you with the yet, is there a perfectionist need in you that it has to be perfect, and that if you don't see it exactly perfectly, then that yet will always be there? But are you able to soften that perfection a little bit and be able to say, I got it. And I'll be really honest with you. I had a dream of working on Broadway. Now, the vision in my head was that I wanted to be a chorus girl in the back of the row and just be on a Broadway stage. I worked on Broadway 3 times, 3 or 4 times as assistant to technical directors, as working on part of a stage management crew. And at a certain point, I realized that my goal, the way I'd written it, was I want to be on Broadway, work on Broadway. And I did that goal. It just didn't match the picture that I had put in my head, that I didn't verbalize as well. So that's why those vision boards and those roadmaps and those little bitty steps along the way can be really helpful. So pay attention to those things. And thank you so much. These are great.
Yeah, Whitney, thank you so much. I mean, Whitney and I have been partners in crime for over, I don't know, 15 years or something. So like I said to her before she started, you got this, and you need to read the chat, because there is so much love and so much thank you and gratitude to you for what you said. And what the strange thing about it is, when we do something that we're afraid of, do you find this to be true, Whitney? We're more confident. That's the way to increase our confidence. Yeah. And yet, so fear plays an important role in letting us know about that. So thank you for that reminder. We haven't really done anything, I don't think, on so much bravery and courage and trying. Did you guys like it? Would you like to do more of that stuff? I hear lots of nods and applauds. Yeah, good.
I'm giving you all a high five, because seriously, you're awesome. The fact that you all were willing to play the yes and game.
Yeah. Right. Well, wait till you see my little mini performance on your behalf.
I can't wait.
All right, everyone. Take care of yourselves. Have an amazing day.
Find the
yes.
And thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Go ahead and unmute. You can say goodbye.
Thank you.
Remove our
Thank
spotlight.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Have an amazing day. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Susan, oh my God.